Hello and welcome live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Global. We'll get you the top stories from India and the region as well as Europe. I'm Gautam Roy. And for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in Washington DC, Jagrati Dave. Hello Jagrati. This is the final day of the RNC as well today. So isn't it all about Trump's speech, and that's what's going to be your focus as well?
Absolutely, Gautam. It's 10 a.m. here in Washington and 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, Donald Trump is indeed preparing to formally accept the Republican Party's nomination for president later today. And that's as US President Joe Biden faces fresh calls to step down from more senior Democrats. We'll hear from our correspondents from around the world. But first, let's get the headlines.
Ursula von der Leyen wins a second 5-year term as the EU's executive head as a reassertion of the European mainstream in face of the far-right surge. UK's new Prime Minister Keir Starmer hosts nearly 50 European leaders, calls on them for closer cooperation on Ukraine, illegal migration, climate change and energy security. Donald Trump is set to make his much-awaited acceptance speech at the Republican National Convention tonight after surviving an assassin's bullet over the weekend. And pressure mounts on Joe Biden as he turns COVID positive. Reports say top Democrats like Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries and Nancy Pelosi have told him polls show not only will he lose, but also cost them the House. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was elected for a second term on Thursday after pledging to create a continental defence union and stay the course on Europe's green transition. The 720-member European Parliament approved her with 401 votes in favour, 284 against and 15 abstentions. She needed 361 votes to pass. Earlier, Green lawmakers in the European Parliament agreed to support Ursula von der Leyen, which increased her chances to win. And in an address to the European Parliament earlier in the day, von der Leyen laid out a program focused on prosperity and security, shaped by the challenges of Russia's war in Ukraine, global economic competition and climate change.
A vision of a stronger Europe that delivers prosperity, that protects people, and that defends democracy. A stronger Europe that delivers social fairness and supports people. A stronger Europe that implements what it agrees in a fair way, and that sticks to the targets of the European Green Deal with pragmatism, technology neutrality, and innovation.
For more on this, DD India's correspondent Alex Kadir has joined us now live from Brussels. Good evening to you, Alex. Now, did the contest go along expected lines, or was von der Leyen's margin of victory a surprise?
Well, it was certainly a surprise compared to what we've been hearing for the last couple of days and weeks. We expected her to squeak by the 361 MEPs she needed. Well, she got 40 more than that, 401, and that is the exact number of MEPs in her centrist coalition, the EPP, Renew and the S&D, the Socialists, altogether would make up 401 MEPs. Now, we know that some of her own coalition MEPs did not vote in support, and we know that the Greens, who are not in that coalition for now, did. And so you will have seen some of her coalition not voting for her, but enough from other parties supporting her to make up for that difference. Interestingly enough, Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy party, the far-right Italian party, who had been neutral at the council, have now voted against Ursula von der Leyen. Giorgia Meloni still not very happy with the incumbent European Commission president. Nevertheless, she is through. This is the biggest hurdle for a European Commission president to clear, and it's certainly one she will be relieved to have done so with such a large margin, particularly because her speech this morning was very much described as a European Christmas tree, gifts for everybody, promises for a variety of parties. The challenge now will be she will need to deliver on those promises.
And Alex, what does this really mean in terms of an outcome for the EU's larger political narrative and how it will face challenges like Ukraine, climate change, immigration going forward?
Well, it means that there's going to be some challenges ahead for Ursula von der Leyen, because she has promised much tougher migration laws to make sure she had some support from far-right parties. She also promised to triple the number of coast and border guards the European Union has. But she's also promised not to compromise on her green agenda, her environmental targets that she set in her last administration. So clearly there will be some challenges along the road, because everything that she's promised is not compatible with every political party that she has promised them to, and that is certainly going to be a challenge. However, the reality of the European institutions, the way the power is divided between them, is that the European Commission still has far more power than the European Parliament, and therefore the re-election of Ursula von der Leyen, her approval from that European Parliament, does symbolize a certain amount of continuity, stability, and similar policies. The focus will be different, the president will be the same, so it should indicate more stability for Europe for the 5 years to come.
All right, that sounds good. Thanks a lot for joining us for the moment, Alex. UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer, during the European Political Community meeting on Thursday, called for closer cooperation in Europe to advance support for Ukraine and tackle the continent's most pressing problems, including illegal migration, climate change, and energy security. Starmer made his bid for a reset in post-Brexit ties with the European Union.
With all of you to reset relationships, rediscover our common interest, and renew the bonds of trust and friendship that brighten the fabric of European life. And the task is urgent, because our security is on the line. Every day Ukraine fights to protect not just the Ukrainian people, but the European people.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was present at the meeting, called on Western allies to allow long-range strikes on Russia, in particular on military airfields.
We have stopped the Russian advance on Kharkiv. Period. Putin has sacrificed tens of thousands of his citizens, but has achieved nothing significant. This was made possible by the bravery of our warriors and the bravery of our partners, who have lifted limitations on the use of Western weapons along our border. Did this lead to escalation? No. On the contrary, it blocked Putin's attempt to expand the war.
Let's get to more on this as well with DD India's Stuart Smith joining us live from London. Stuart, good evening. Does this summit mark the beginning of a resetting of the UK's relations with Europe, which Keir Starmer clearly desires?
Yeah, that's right. Keir Starmer would like that to be the case. And to be fair, he's heard from the French President Emmanuel Macron, who has suggested it could be a great opportunity for a reset. Consider the Labour Party has taken a completely different approach to Europe, both during the Brexit referendum, when it stayed neutral on the matter, and also later, now that the government has come to power, in saying that it is keen to try to build bridges with Europe, something that the Conservative Party struggled to do even after Boris Johnson's premiership with Rishi Sunak. The European Union still wary of what the Conservatives stood for when it came to collaboration with Europe. Keir Starmer, while he says the country is not going to be rejoining the European Union or the customs union, he says, in his lifetime, it is closer relationships that he seeks. And this is a great example of that, Downing Street says, coming together with not just European Union leaders, but European leaders more broadly. And with that, the reason he wants to, or one of the many reasons he wants to, is to allow the UK to deal with its illegal immigration problem, a problem he says can only be addressed with the help of European leaders, tackling the problem, as he describes it, at source, where these immigrants and asylum seekers come from France, Belgium, the Netherlands, over the English Channel into the United Kingdom.
All right. And Ukraine also figured prominently in the deliberations, with Zelensky spelling out what his country needs. Once again, he does that at every given opportunity. Now, what sort of assurances did he get?
Yeah. Well, from the UK and Keir Starmer, he's had exactly the assurances that he wants in terms of continuation of support. There's always some fear. A new government comes to power. Will Ukraine see the support that it wanted, and will their support be continued? He's got that from Keir Starmer quite clearly. In fact, it was in the manifesto that the UK's support to Ukraine would continue as it has before. There's also the chance that by the end of this meeting, there may be a new agreement signed between the UK and Ukraine relating to security guarantees, though the detail of that agreement isn't yet public. It comes as Germany has suggested, or rather it was discovered by Reuters journalists, that the draft budget may halve the amount of support that Germany is giving to Ukraine. It looks like Berlin's justifying that because $50 billion in loans should come to Ukraine from frozen Russian assets, but it's certainly a concern for Ukraine whenever it sees funding potentially going down. The big fear here, of course, for European leaders as well as Ukraine, is that should there be a Trump presidency, Donald Trump in the United States, then there will be less support for Ukraine, if any at all, something the Defense Minister of Ukraine addressed earlier. He said, whatever the outcome of the US elections, we will find solutions.
All right, so some pivoting there required as well, considering a Donald Trump presidency in the offing if it happens. Thanks a lot for joining us for the moment, Stuart. And Donald Trump is expected to make a setting the grounds of the contest a fresh acceptance speech at the final day of the Republican National Convention tonight after his brush with an assassin's bullet. My colleague Jagrati Dave is in Washington, D.C. and gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Well, Jagrati, will the Trump speech, the acceptance speech, will it reciprocate the kind of conciliatory tone the Democrats took after there was an attempted assassination on him? Will that happen today?
Well, we'll have to wait and see, Gautam, as the Republican National Convention culminates with former US President Donald Trump expected to accept the party's presidential nomination. He's due to accept his third consecutive party nod in prime time before thousands of supporters in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Donald Trump's wife, Melania, and his daughter, Ivanka, who both spoke at the previous two conventions, are not planning to address the gathering this time, but they are expected to attend. Lara Trump, his daughter-in-law, rounded off Tuesday with a speech about Trump's personal warmth and love for his family. Now, as Mr. Trump prepares to address the Republican National Convention on the final night of the four-day event, his rival in the race for the White House, Democratic President Joe Biden, is self-isolating at his home in Delaware after testing positive for COVID-19. Nick Harper has been following developments from Washington.
Donald Trump, just 5 days after surviving an assassination attempt, will address the Republican National Convention in a speech that will firmly cement his control of the Republican Party. This week, the event in Milwaukee has seen incredible unity, with the party coming around the president. Even political rivals who ran against him for the Republican nomination, like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, have all fallen in line behind Trump, giving rousing speeches confirming their support and loyalty for the former president. Trump says that he completely rewrote his Thursday night speech after the assassination attempt. He says he will now focus on the idea of unity. He told one interviewer that he sees the speech as a chance to bring the whole country, even the whole world, together. Trump has seen a surge in nationwide polls in recent days as well, with some numbers suggesting he leads Joe Biden in the main 6 swing states that could decide November's election by wide margins, in one state by as much as 7%. Meanwhile, President Biden is experiencing mild symptoms after he was diagnosed with COVID on Wednesday afternoon. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said that Biden is vaccinated and boosted, but he intends to self-isolate at his home while continuing to carry out all of his duties fully. It comes amid renewed pressure from senior Democrats who are calling for Biden to suspend his re-election campaign. On Wednesday, Congressman Adam Schiff became the latest high-profile Democrat to add his voice to those calling for Biden to step aside. And there's reporting that former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer have both told Biden privately his re-election bid is hurting the party as a whole and that he should end his campaign. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
Now, US President Joe Biden has also said he would end his presidential campaign if it emerged that he had a medical condition. As Nick Harper just reported for us, Biden, who is under fire from fellow Democrats to drop his re-election campaign, tested positive for COVID-19 while visiting Las Vegas on Wednesday and is self-isolating after experiencing mild symptoms.
If I had some medical condition that emerged, if the doctors came to me and said, you got this problem, that problem. But I made a serious mistake in the whole debate.
Now, reports say Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi have all expressed deep concerns directly to Joe Biden in recent days that he'll not only lose the White House, but also cost the party any chance of winning back the House of Representatives. Joe Biden has thus far refused to entertain public calls from around 20 congressional Democrats to step aside following that halting debate performance against Donald Trump. President Biden, meanwhile, has said he will cancel $1.2 billion in student debt. The White House says each of those borrowers has received an average of over $35,000 in debt cancellation. The announcement marks the latest round in government loan relief after the Supreme Court last year blocked President Joe Biden's college loan forgiveness plan. With the latest student loan forgiveness, the Biden administration says it has waived $168.5 billion in debt for roughly 4.8 million Americans, and that's according to the Department of Education. Now, US Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle has agreed to testify before the House of Representatives Oversight Committee on July the 22nd for a hearing related to the shooting of former President Donald Trump at a rally in Pennsylvania. Security at the rally has been under scrutiny and a number of lawmakers have raised questions about it. The FBI said it was probing the shooting as an assassination attempt. Meanwhile, calls for Cheatle's resignation have intensified, with House Speaker Mike Johnson and other Republicans adding their names to the list. Johnson said on Wednesday he will create a special bipartisan task force to investigate the shooting. Now, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov says Russia does not rule out a new deployment of nuclear missiles in response to the planned US stationing of long-range conventional weapons in Germany. Ryabkov said the defense of Russia's Kaliningrad region, which is in direct proximity to NATO members Poland and Lithuania, was a particular focus. The United States last week said it would start positioning weapons in Germany from 2026 to demonstrate its commitment to NATO as well as defence in Europe. And NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg says the alliance's new setup for Command for Coordinating Military Aid and Military Training for Ukraine will be up and running from September. NATO leaders agreed at a summit earlier this month to launch the effort to improve the process of getting aid to Ukraine.
The time to stand for freedom and democracy is now, and the place is Ukraine. And NATO allies are stepping up our support to Ukraine. We have agreed to establish a command to coordinate and provide security assistance and training for Ukraine. And I'm glad that today I can announce that the command will be operational in September.
And that's it from me in the studio. Back to you, Gautam.
Thank you, Jayati, for joining us from Washington, D.C. And up next on DD India Global, a twice-a-decade conclave called the Third Plenum ends in Beijing without any Big Bang ideas to perk up the Chinese economy. And most of Central and Southern Europe suffers from a searing heat wave. Serbia's Rusanda salt lake dries up due to extreme temperatures.
While there's still enough food for everyone on the planet, food shortages are a real problem. Let's take a look at the factors causing this and what can be done to save our food.
What we host now, it's called Farm School. One of the goals is to teach them agriculture so that 50 years from now, when there's so much change in climate, they don't have to deal with learning two new skills.
We empower women who are really poor and who don't have too much economic empowerment to eat better.
We adopt this strategy in our product. The volatile compounds induce the defence mechanism and help to prolong shelf life by 2 more days. So it's purely natural.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Gautam Roy. Now, a twice-a-decade conclave known as the Third Plenum has wrapped up in Beijing, with the ruling Chinese Communist Party pledging on Thursday to better manage the market economy through reforms, but it offered no clear bombshells. It also accepted the resignation of former Foreign Minister Qin Gang and removed him from the party's Central Committee. Laura Westbrook has more from Hong Kong.
In the communique released by state media, the Central Committee adopted a resolution on deepening reforms and advancing Chinese modernization. The Third Plenum also agreed to advance reforms on taxation and finance and stressed the need to tackle the risks in the property sector. We are expecting to get more details in the coming days and weeks, but investors had been watching very closely to see what came out of this communique to get an idea of what Chinese President Xi Jinping's vision for the economy was for the next few years. China is dealing with many challenges in its economy that has seen growth slow. That includes an embattled property crisis, as well as high youth unemployment, with many young people worried about their jobs, as well as weak consumer spending. So many eyes had been on this communique to see what detail it might provide. And it does appear to be doubling down on the strategy of self-reliance, science and technology, especially with Xi Jinping's new productive forces policy that essentially is a policy that focuses on high-end industries and high-end manufacturing to ensure that China has technological self-reliance and doesn't have to rely on other countries like the US who might block it from accessing technology. It appears that China is very much doubling down on this export-driven growth strategy, and that has the potential to exacerbate trade tensions with the United States and with the European Union, who have accused China of overcapacity, of using cheap Chinese goods to flood overseas markets. In Hong Kong, Laura Westbrook reporting for DD India.
A recent report claiming that India is grappling with the challenge of ensuring that every child receives the essential vaccinations needed to protect against diseases has raised concerns. The UNICEF report presented a flawed comparison with countries without taking into consideration India's population and high vaccination coverage. On the contrary, the government of India has dedicatedly worked to vaccinate its citizens. As a percentage of total population, zero-dose children account for 0.11% of the country's total population. Given the large population size of India, it has the highest number of vaccinated children across the countries. full immunization coverage of the country for FY 23-24 stands at 93.23%. India's immunization program is the largest public health initiative globally. It targets a massive cohort of 2.6 crore children and 2.9 crore pregnant women. That's 26 million and 29 million respectively. Under Mission Indradhanush, 54.6 million children and 13.2 million pregnant women have been vaccinated till 2023. Now, with temperatures breaking records, most of Central and Southern Europe have been suffering due to extended heat waves. The Rusandar salt lake of Serbia dried up due to extreme heat, while capital Belgrade recorded warmest temperatures of 40 degrees Celsius. That's all we have in this edition of DD India Global, but do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. And for those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India's mobile app. It's available on both Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screen and download the app now. We'll be back with more news and updates as a break here on DD India. I'm Gautam Roy, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Global.